You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me today is Dr. Joe Venosa. Thanks for coming out, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
So we're going to get to the county council meeting from this past week and talk about the special legislative meeting for the city council about the veto, the density from Mayor Randy Taylor. But I think before that, I think we want to wish PAC 14 a happy 25th anniversary, right?
That's right, quarter century.
We came in here as volunteers about 8 months ago.
Has it been 8 months?
It has been that long. They've been great to us. We're obviously a politics show. We don't necessarily come in and talk politics to them. We're allowed to be free thinkers, and
They've done everything and beyond as far as their mission for public access.
yeah, we'd like to thank their board and Tom and Jen and Xavier and Chris too. Yeah, everybody's been great, and
they have free coffee and water in the back supply room. So that's always good.
They charge me for that stuff.
Well,
maybe
I got the handsome man.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
No, that is free. So before we get into the veto from Mayor Randy Taylor, and we're going to have Bob Taylor on as well to kind of give some background of the density, I want to talk a little bit about the county council meeting. It wasn't a lot of public hearings or anything like that, but they did decide to move the capital improvement, the approving that plan to coincide with the operating budget for 2026 coming up in June, right?
Yes.
And again, we've talked about it on the show before. It's just important because we just don't know where the state of Maryland's going to fall. Right?
I just think it's a common sense decision. Like, why would you get out before the skis, so to speak?
Yeah.
We're going to know a lot more about the condition of the state and federal budget and its impacts on us by that point.
Well, in the county council, this is where one of the areas I think they really shine. They did have the Board of Education in for a work session. Part of that was to talk about the funding for Fruitland Primary. I mean, that project's going to happen, but we're just not sure how the funding's going to shake out.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's hard to plan for the next fiscal year if you don't know exactly what's going to happen from this year.
It's true. And I also like that they included sort of a general presentation about building conditions throughout the other schools, because I think when you're talking about a project like Fruitland, you have to put it in the context of, it's in that condition in part because, like a conveyor belt, there's older buildings that need to get worked on, and then others are coming up behind it. And so giving people a heads up as to what's coming down the pike, I think, really matters.
They were talking about some of the school populations too. I mean, the county's getting close to having a need for another school to be built.
And redistricting too, I think.
Is that they're actually actively working on that now.
Yeah.
So obviously the big story this week coming is going to be the special legislative sessions, 5:30 on Monday at the county or the government office building. This is the city council is put it on the agenda to override Randy Taylor's veto.
Yeah, and they've put it on rather quickly.
Okay.
It seems that they're sort of pumping the gas all the way on this.
What do you think is the one thing they really should consider holding up before they make their final decision?
I think, from my perspective, and this is just, I feel like it's sort of a common sense thing, is wait till the city's parking study is completed.
Yeah, doesn't it seem odd that there's not the parking study that's there was done by the developers, older. It was before the Ross was built or developed.
Yes.
Why do you think there is such a rush to even to get this done before that study?
My own personal view is that this has become a very personal battle, if you will, between the council, or some of the council, and the mayor. But it's interesting that even arguably the biggest cheerleader for this project, Mike Dunn, the CEO of the Greater Salisbury Committee, has even said himself, right, that he supports a parking study. And when Councilwoman Sharon DeShiel suggested that we table the vote, or that the council table the vote until the study is completed, and there was no discussion, not a word from the other council members, no justification. It's just, seemed from my perspective to be rammed through. That's a very telling thing, and the fact that there's no public defense or discussion about it is really shocking.
Well, if you go back to the November Planning and Zoning meeting, I mean, we've talked about how long that meeting was. And then when it was over, the Planning and Zoning Committee had no open discussion, or very little, I should say. Chip DeShiel went right into reading the resolution, and then it was voted 6-1.
It's amazing that, and again, you expect this. I expect the developer to give an elaborate defense of why they want it. I expect opponents to give an elaborate argument for why they don't. The fact that nobody on the planning and zoning, other than Joe Holloway, and the fact that nobody on the city council, other than Sharon DeShiel, nobody wants to even defend or explain it in public, in a meeting, that blows my mind in a way that I'm not used to.
You know, you've been involved in city politics for several years now. You attend the city meetings. When we look back 5 years from now, what do you think we're going to say about this moment in time?
Well, I think we're going to say, meaning us on this particular side of the issue, and again, for open agenda purposes, I think you and I would agree that we're against the current density amendment as it's written. Not density in principle,
No,
but
absolutely
this
not,
particular
yeah.
way. I think we're going to say, if we're around in 5 years, we were right.
I think we might say, where are we going to park?
Well, that too, yeah. Or can you break change of a 50 to park in this?
Well, yeah, or take the whole 50, maybe.
Maybe.
I think one of the aspects of this that worry me is I want to come downtown.
Yeah.
I live in the county. I live on the east side. I can tell you, if there's not ample parking, the decision, I'm not even going to try to come downtown.
And it's a real tragedy too, because I know that there are current small business owners in downtown who are publicly in favor of this text amendment, largely out of desperation, because they feel that for years the city council and city government, especially under Jake Day, largely ignored their interests as small business owners, and they've kind of latched on to this last sort of effort. I think the problem is, though, when you get desperate, you get sloppy, in the sense of now you're hitching yourself to a wagon that might not actually help you get to where you need to go.
When you look at the whole process, starting with planning and zoning, the staff DID report, there's been a lot of blinking yellow lights. Slow down. Traffic study now.
Yeah.
I think when we look back 5 years from now, the bad parts about this probably could have been solved just through some better planning and maybe more patience.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have Bob Taylor. He's a retired attorney from the county, from Wacomico County. He was the county council's attorney at one time, and Mayor Randy Taylor in. And I want to ask them, one, for background, and two, maybe a little perspective, and maybe looking into the crystal ball a little bit.
Great.
So thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
So when we come back, we're going to have Bob Taylor on, and we're going to get a little bit of background about the upcoming special legislative session for the city council to override Mayor Randy Taylor's veto, and just get a little bit of sense of the history and the perspective of the future. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. And the Salisbury City Council is scheduled this coming Monday to hear the veto override. In order to get some background, I wanted to bring in someone who's lived and worked in Salisbury for over 50 years. Mr. Bob Taylor, thanks for coming out.
Sure enough.
So you're a retired attorney, and you've been involved in city politics and county politics, even as the council's attorney at one time. But more importantly, you had an office downtown. I want to get background for why.
Okay, well, I moved here in 71, and for about 45 years thereafter, I had an office downtown. It was in One Plaza East. I was downtown, I'm guessing 330 days a year, or probably, mostly to be in the office. Since then, I've been down maybe once, twice a week the last 8 years or so. So I'm still pretty familiar with it.
What area encompasses the Central Business District?
Well, to me, and I have a chart here, I don't know if you can pick it up or not.
Here.
To me, it's the area that's bounded by the two prongs of the river and what I still call Route 13 and Route 50. Now, the names, they have other names, but they were at one time the main Route 13 and Route 50 through town. The main area is defined by the two prongs of the river and the two highways.
So really from where the intersection of Route Business 50 and Business 13 are, down to the hospital, all the way out Riverside Drive, past the roundabout, and even slightly across the one prong of the river.
Right. Basically, in the 60s, it became obvious that some of the retail was beginning to move out of the area. Yeah. So the downtown area, they decided to do a couple of things. They cleared what used to be the downtown plaza between Division Street and the river. And that became a walking kind of a mall area, as you call it. It's no longer that way. They've reconverted it to a street. And they also developed parking lots, including the 3 parking lots that were going to be the subject, I think, of the mayor's commentary, where they've now sold those parking lots off for apartment development.
What was the process to them selling these parking lots?
Well, you have to kind of look at the plans over the years have kind of evolved to some extent to wanting some residential development downtown around 2010, and that's when they decided that there could be residential development up to 40 units per acre
Okay.
in the downtown area.
And this was on the comprehensive plan.
And that's on the comprehensive plan. And that's been that way until right now. Now, if the veto is not overridden, that will go to 80 units per acre.
Yeah, that's
So-
the text amendment.
Yeah, so that's the text amendment. But to go back and kind of bring it up from 2010, I think you have to really mention Jake Day.
Okay.
I mean, he's the catalyst for what happened. He was on the city council at the time, but he was the main mover for selling the old fire station on Division Street after it had moved out to where it is now, a little further to the west.
So the original
Yeah,
headquarters.
so
was
they sold that for what's called Headquarters Live. That was sold to DevReco LLC, and I might mention that's essentially a Gillis firm.
Okay.
That bombed. It would appear. It ran for 2 or 3 years.
It didn't stay in
They
business.
didn't stay in business.
Absolutely.
They're actually renting it now to the city
Yeah.
for the new, quote, city hall, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
and probably getting as much in rent each year as what they bought it for from the city
Yeah.
10 or 12 years ago.
And the city owned it at one
Yeah,
time.
I mean, you talk about stupid. I mean, this, it's the Academy Award.
Yeah.
So anyway, then Jake got together what they call the Downtown Master Plan. It's called officially Envision Salisbury.
Okay.
That was a group of architectural students from the University of Maryland, which I think is one of the places where Jake has a degree. And they came down and they decided, well, here's a big plan for downtown. And it did involve development of different kinds, including Headquarters Live. That was part of the deal.
Okay.
And I would mention parking lot 15, because we're going to talk about that. That would remain parking.
Now, which one's parking lot 15?
Parking lot 15 is the one that is next to where the synagogue is. It would be at the western end of the downtown plaza.
Okay.
Small lot across from the Opportunity Shop. It's about, I'm guessing, 50 cars.
Going
40.
towards Mill Street.
Yeah, going towards Mill Street.
Okay.
So anyway, what happened is to bring this about, they wanted to sell these parking lots to developers. Now, to sell something, an asset of the city, it has to be declared surplus.
Okay.
In other words, if it's not declared surplus, you can't sell it.
Surplus meaning it's something you have, but you're not using.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, no, actually, that's the general definition.
Yeah.
But that's not the definition to sell something.
Because they were still parking lots
You
being used.
just call it surplus.
Okay.
I mean, these parking lots were being used.
Yeah.
We have a photo, I think you've got it,
Yeah. I'll put the photo up.
that shows the 3 lots we're talking about, 1, 11, and 15, on, I think it's April 4th of 2023, about 2 years ago. This was before the Unity Square was developed.
Okay.
And there were 276 cars. It was a Tuesday morning
Okay.
on those 3 lots. Now, that ain't surplus.
Well, I used to
You
park
know.
there to go to the dentist.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my preferred parking when when I had my office there, I parked in the garage because that's where they had the permits. It was cheaper. But in any event, once I left and didn't have my office, then I'd park there. That was my preferred place,
Yeah.
right where Unity Square is now. So anyway, that's kind of what happened. So you hear certain people who want the downtown development to go through. Oh, these lots were just surplus. We declared them surplus. 2 of them were sold by the city again to DevReco.
Okay.
That name keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Yes.
And they were sold for development up to 300 residential units.
Okay.
That's what it says in the contract. That was in 2015. That was to close that contract by the end of June of the next year, 2016. It didn't. They never got, as far as I'm aware, any of the formal permits they need to to do anything close to 300 units. They were also talking about, and I can read you, this is right out of the contract document, involving parking. The current Lot 1 parking spaces shall be replaced with a combination of the following. Now, this is replaced by the developer,
Okay.
not the city. New additional on-street parking, that would have been the city, of course. New under-building garage parking in parts of Lot 1's development. That's where the apartments were going to be.
Okay.
So they're talking about parking underneath.
Yeah.
Similar to the condo that's a little further out Riverside Drive. That's in the CBD. That's about 36 units an acre, has on-site parking, including parking under.
And that's a typical thing in an urban area.
Yeah, that's right. Then it ends, there will be no net loss of public parking.
And that's an interesting point there. Okay.
And see, now this was all on the developer.
Who would have paid for that garage?
As I read the document, there's no question that it would have been the developer. So in any event, come 2023, everything changes. They call it an amendment of the 2015 contract, which at that point was dead in the water. It was a completely different firm that they were dealing with. So it was a new firm, Salisbury Town Center Apartments.
Well, and one key change I brought up earlier, the parking requirement has changed too, right?
Yeah, well, in 2018, and I think this was to maybe give the development that they had done with Gillis Gilkerson in 2015 to try to give it a jump start, they did away with any parking requirement for residential development.
So the rules are different.
Yeah, the rules are completely different
Okay.
than what was done in 2015 with DevReco.
Okay.
So what you have here is, in my view, a four-letter word. It's a scam. It's not an amendment of an existing contract with the party that was the party to that contract. It's a completely different deal with a new firm, a new developer.
We don't have the traffic study, but there's now a parking garage involved in this version, but this one's not paid for by the developer. This is paid for by the Salisbury government,
Yeah,
correct?
the contract, the amended contract, so to speak, LDA they call it, that calls for the city to build for $10 million a parking garage for, I think it's 450 spaces.
And I've heard you speak about this, but a lot of folks I've met in the public don't understand this part. And I think this is really important. This text amendment that could potentially be overridden this Monday with the Salisbury City Council changes the density for the entire downtown.
That's right, not just for this piece of property, but all of this area in pink. All of that area in pink, it changes it.
So if I asked you to look in your crystal ball 10 years from now, what do you think if this veto override does happen and the text amendment is put into law, it's 80 units an acre for the central business district, what do you think 10 years from now we're saying about this point in time?
Well, to me, it looks like it would be the strangulation of this downtown area. In other words, when you look at this area, other than Lot 10, the lot up here, which is close to 3 acres, I believe, there's no real large area that could be parking. And that won't be parking if it's developed for a hotel.
Yeah,
what
and
it's
that's the
sold
plan.
for.
Yeah.
Now, it may not become a hotel, may become something else. But right now, its days as a parking lot appear to be ended.
So stay with us. When we come back, Mayor Randy Taylor will actually be in the studio to discuss the veto, the special session to override the veto, and exactly what information he hopes the City Council and the public consider before the final decision's made. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me now is Mayor Randy Taylor from the City of Salisbury.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Appreciate you inviting me in.
Thanks for coming out. I want to take some time to explain exactly what you're concerned with the text amendment for the density increase and get a sense for why you vetoed it and what you hope the City Council considers.
Yeah, I think one of the first things you understand is that I am for development downtown. I've been building downtown for 25 years, and I want to see positive things come to the downtown. The present project is not that.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of things discussed about what this project is and what it isn't. The first thing I want to point out is this project is not affordable. It's not the developer's fault. It just costs a lot of money to build these kinds of projects. So I don't hold them account for that. But it's a market rate product, number one. Number two, the next thing they've said is that it's going to help, the whole, supply demand curve. And the reality is, even if you max out the density, increased density throughout the footprint, you won't move the needle one little bit in terms of the dwelling units in the city of Salisbury. It's 44,000. Even if you added another 300 to it, it's not going to make a meaningful difference. Make a contribution, yeah, but not a market-changing event. The other thing is that they've kind of marshaled the local businesses in downtown that this is going to make an impact in a positive way in their business. And I think if they're honest, and again, I owned a business downtown with my ex-wife for 17 years, and I know that ecosystem very well from the perspective of a retailer. And she was very successful. She did a great job, and she was a very good retailer. But the reality is that the people that support downtown are living in the county. And even if you added 300 or 400 residential units on a demographic basis, you are not going to move the needle from the perspective of demand downtown for people that live there. But at the same time, I think you're going to create an accessibility problem for people that live in the county to get and park downtown, which is the biggest challenge.
I can tell you, I'm living proof of this. For many years, my dentist was downtown, and during the construction phase, when they were rerouting all the pipes and redoing the roads downtown, my dentist office had to relocate out of the central business
I remember
district.
he was my neighbor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He treated me well,
Yeah,
thank
good.
goodness.
Yeah.
But there was a point in time I was going to have to leave his dental office if he didn't move.
Yeah.
You know, so that's
Well,
where we were.
and just again, I mean, I appreciate anybody that's willing to be in business downtown, and I certainly want to be successful. But at the end of the day, if you look at the main players in terms of that have the people down there, GMB and WMDT and Becker Morgan, these people have 60, 70, 80 people working for them that are bringing dollars and people and bodies downtown. If we create an accessibility problem via the parking demand issue, there are going to be places that they can be in business other than the downtown. And then what do we do with those buildings?
We had Bob Taylor in earlier, and he spoke directly about the change in the parking requirement from 2018.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit, how did that factor into you veto in this bill? Did it have any impact?
Yeah, so sometime, and Bob would have a better sense of the data, sometime in 2020 or 21, I guess it was, that former Mayor Jake Day rolled back the parking standard in the CBD, the Central Business District, which as a starter issue was not a big a deal, because what it basically was doing was, if there was a conversion of a use in an existing building downtown from, say, for example, a hat shop to a restaurant, and the restaurant required more parking, the people that were converting couldn't provide more parking even if they want to, because they don't own the parking. Yeah. So it made sense to say, you know what, we've got excess parking of surface parking downtown. Let's just remove that as a criteria. Fast forward to 2023-24, and you start talking about infill construction, meaning you're building on existing lots. You're doing two things. One, you're eliminating parking, which is the surface parking. And two, you're creating a demand for new parking. And then you couple that with no parking standard, you've got a recipe for a problem. So which is what I'm about to show you.
So that same shop that changed from a hat shop to a restaurant that was relying on the parking, that's hoping to draw in the county residents from outside the central business district, is losing the parking that they aren't really required to have, but they are definitely counting on.
I brought you a spreadsheet, and basically shows two projects that are both on the same side of Mill Street over by Chesapeake East and Brew River. And in those two projects, between the parking they eliminate, the parking demand they're going to create, and what they're putting back, we're going to be 210 or so parking spaces short based on every other standard in the city that we apply, except in this case, the CBD, Central Business District. So there are going to be people living downtown that are looking for a space and not going to have one, and it's just bad planning. And it's going to be a disaster, in my view. Now, I'm not even sure that the council, the members that are for it, are even doing this math. And although I've tried to reach out to them multiple times to explain it to them, they have this complicated sense from the developers that there's this sort of nighttime, daytime, people are gone, but that doesn't make any sense. People have to have a place to park when they come home at night. That's the reality.
Yeah.
So when I have those kind of conversations, I chuckle a little bit, because they're making a very simple issue very complicated. So the people that are going to suffer over there are going to be Mad Hatter, it's going to be Brew River, and it's going to be the people that live in those neighborhoods that are going to try to park in every spot they can find. Or the project's not going to be successful. That's the other alternative, which we don't want either. So I also did an analysis of Lot 16, which is on the other side of Mill Street, near where the new project of the Salisbury Town Center project, and it creates another negative, I think, 110 spots based on the people that they're moving off, the demand they're creating, and no replacement parking, or at least off-site. So it's a problem that will create itself because the city has sold all of their parking lots, and these new parking lot purchases are planning to redevelop. So there'll be the situation all the way through the footprint 6 and 7 times. And when you don't have a parking standard or you make them put the parking back, you're going to have a disaster.
And you can't create new land.
Got ourselves into is a lot of momentum with a bad plan.
Yeah.
And so now it's like this political pressure to say yes when the obvious question is, the answer is no. To say, no, but we can rework it.
Well, and one of the vital pieces of information when you have a project this way, this size, is a traffic study.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a disconnect there. There was a traffic study several years back before even the Ross was developed.
Right.
That was done by this developer. But you don't have an updated traffic study. But are you expecting one here soon?
So the city, on its own, has requested an analysis of the parking standard, the parking issue. So I would say that the developer would argue that he has done an adequate parking study. It's kind of like buying a house and letting the seller order the appraisal. It's like, wait a minute.
Of course, the numbers work.
Yeah, the numbers work. But unfortunately, I think, the developer should equally want this thing to work and be parked. And so, just so you know, I've affirmed this not only with planners, with developers that are developing in other parts of the world. They're all kind of like with their eyes going, "What are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense." I know it doesn't make any sense, but I'm having to deal with it as a conversation because we are in a political mode where we're trying to get something going with a bad plan. And I understand that part. We've got a lot of momentum. People want to see things happening downtown. I get that part, but it just doesn't work. And it's been a very difficult fight to push back on.
It was interesting in the November planning and zoning meeting. The staff report, the DID report, actually said that they don't support this text amendment.
Yes.
Some of their reservations were infrastructure like water and sewer, but a lot of it did focus on the lack of a up-to-date and accurate traffic study and parking study, correct?
Parking. It's really more of a parking than an impact. Well, the traffic is a component of it. You're right. Because you're right. A lot of moving cars downtown, in terms of access points. So to your point, we as a city, as our planning group did make a negative recommendation. And the Planning Commission, again, I think impacted by politics and momentum, didn't see this. So planning is a protector of the public. It protects you, protects me. There's principles at play, and you just can't throw out the parking standard in the middle of a high dense area already. And people keep on referring to people saying like, "Oh, there's lots of parking downtown." Well, there is now. But it's going away.
It goes away.
And they keep saying it like that. And that's, at some level, how superficially some people are thinking about this. They're not thinking, okay, well, what if it's gone? Then what do we have? And so it's been very frustrating.
Give us a sense in your mind, 5 years from now, say this veto is overridden by the city council. What do you, and they've broken ground.
Yeah.
We've taken away parking that's been there for many years, and people are starting to move into these new apartments.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the impact for both city and county residents? What do you think that they'll notice the most?
Well, I think they'll notice immediately that there's a parking problem.
Okay.
And I think it's ironic. Well, two things I'd say is that there are several more arrows in the quiver on this in terms of just the density vote. So there'll be other things that arise in terms of opposition to this thing. That said, I think there'll be some legal lawsuits after this to try and say, hey, wait a minute, you're not, this is not good planning. This is aligned with the Maryland planning principles. So they have not proven a single thing relative to the change that satisfies the expectation of what would be expected for a change of this order. So they've not really done any kind, other than they just changed the number, which that's not good planning.
Yeah.
So I think people will notice immediately is that there's a parking problem, and I think it has the possibility of ruining the downtown.
And this text amendment that is passed doesn't just impact this one project. this would actually change the whole standard for the entire central business district.
Interestingly, I don't think that the 40 units per acre work from a parking perspective, and now they've doubled it to 80 potentially that they could do, potentially try it. So it's really frightening that so we've got to kind of go back to the drawing board on that front.
But even like an old building like the what is the current health department building? It used to be J.C. Penney's many years ago.
Yeah.
The county is moving out of that building.
Yep.
Is it, if this text amendment does pass, is it possible that we've altered the maybe the next chapter of the life of that property? I'm not saying that the building stays, but if the units per acre go from 40 to 80, it would have an impact on that property, and there's still no parking requirement for whoever develops that next, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so and that's part of the problem. For example, the Lot 1 and 11 project is that the number of permits that exist and the demand of what this project, based on its current plan, would already eat up all the spots in that garage, and there's no other place to put a additional garage. So it's like, that be it. So if they went to develop the health department building, obviously, then they'd have to have some need for parking, obviously, depending upon the units, and more or greater, or more or less, and there'd be no place to put them because there's no spots in the current garage. It's at capacity. The new one would be booked, and we don't have any land to build anything else or provide any more parking.
Well, speaking of the new one, who pays for the new parking garage in this plan?
Well, that's a whole nother kettle of fish from the perspective of, even if it gets built and we charge the highest fee we've ever charged for people to park in it, to include the new apartments, we would lose the city about $400,000 or $500,000 a year in operating costs. Wow. So we can't cover the debt service based on what. So it's going to be a millstone around the city's neck from the perspective in order just to provide a developer, a private developer, their parking.
Yeah.
It's a terrible deal.
How does this project in this amendment, this text amendment, differ from the development that the hospital's doing at the old Daily Times building? There's a plan there in place as well,
Yeah,
right?
so this is an example of, if anybody's arguing that the mayor is against density, they actually are proposing a higher density per acre than this one. But the difference is the design has made a way for them to have the parking on site. They're going to pay for it, and they're going to provide it. So it's going to zero impact from the city. It's a conforming project from a parking perspective. They park what they are building, and they're paying for it all. So that's an ideal environment.
So if this Salisbury Town Center project was more designed and planned along those lines, would your opinion about whether or not
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we're working towards. I mean, the local developers, not so much, but I've been talking to the guys over the bridge, and what we're trying to do is work an alternate plan that reduces the density, changes the style of the project, and maybe reduces the expense of the city. And we'll work through that, and hopefully we can work a deal in that regard.
So 5:30 this Monday is the special session where they're going to consider overriding your veto.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, from there are other options. And would you come back in and give us an update on where things stand?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
So thank you for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode.
I know what I'm doing, man.